I was told the true definition of a man was to never cry. Work till you're tired, got to provide. Always be the rock for my fam, protect them by all.
You understand the
Hey, we're at official drinking age. We've matured. We've grown up. You're tuned into Bedroom Beethovens, episode number 21. This is the podcast where we put the spotlight on music producers. Why, you ask? Because music can help stimulate our imagination. One of the key components of the creative process. Listening to a song we love or fully immersing ourselves in a piece of beautiful music can shift our mood, create images in our mind to impact our limbic brain and open us up to new ideas. So what better idea than to chat with the people who are responsible for that response? I'm really honored to feature Jansport J this episode. Me personally, I've been listening to him for years and years, and he's become a staple in LA's famed underground beat scene, producing for the likes of Snoop Dogg, Planet Asia, and Dom Kennedy. I think this episode is a good fit because both of our projects, whether it's him making music or me crafting another podcast for you, it always starts off with a desire to want to create something. But I did want to say that we recently passed the birthday of Tupac Shakur, and in doing so, I reflected on him and his music. And I know this is kind of a departure of what I normally do, but if you humor me for a second, I just wanted to broadcast that admittedly, up until this point, I hadn't really listened to his music. Like, listened. I didn't understand who he was or what he represented to American culture. And when people said that he was the best ever, I always felt it was overrated. But after he died, though, I saw huge, powerful shockwaves move through the collective mind of our culture. Black people were grieving in a way that I didn't expect or understand. And it was clear that something really important had come and gone before white people had a chance to understand it. And to a large degree, they still don't. And the same can be said for Nipsey's death. When I did finally give myself over to his music and put effort into understanding it, I discovered for myself what so many people already knew, that Tupac expertly navigated worlds that so few people get a chance to visit, spending time in the most impoverished slums, as well as giant opulent mansions, confined to prisons for periods, and carried across the globe on tours that celebrated his freedom. His music was at times disturbing and aggressive, and at other times the height of tenderness. And like so many other, for lack of a better word, mythological characters throughout history, he lives on. So with that said, this podcast is the opportunity to give these musical figures their flowers while they can still smell them. And I hope you feel the same. So thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe. Leave me a review. Visit bedroombeethovens.com. You can find me on Instagram. I also post these episodes on YouTube. Just search for Bedroom Beethovens. Yeah? All right, let's get into it. I'm your host, Cello, and
it's the Bedroom Beethoven Podcast.
Oh man, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you're a very interesting guy. First off, I've been listening to you for a long ass time. So long, I don't even remember where, how, or when I was introduced to you. I know your name, I know your music, so it's a part of me at this point, you know.
Oh man, that's love. I appreciate that. That's crazy.
Yeah, what I find most perplexing about you though is like there's if anyone follows you on social, there's this dichotomy of humble and like cynic. Like I'm sure chasing commercial fame is and never was the goal, but at the same time, you're semi surprised that you have fans, large amounts, that people like your music and turn around and you work your ass off because you're self aware that people want to be in your position. I find that really great because that behavior usually isn't a result of that thinking, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hope I don't come off as too much of a cynic. I think my approach has always kind of been, like I always say, you know, I want to attract and never chase anything. I always felt like at the very least, access to commercial acts and opportunities in that lane was available to me just based off of the relationships. But those relationships have been maintained, ironically, because I've always kind of stuck to myself, my style, and just kind of, just tried to have a good character and a good reputation in the industry. And, what I've been told throughout, my years here is that people appreciate me kind of sticking to the soul sample sound. A lot of producers I've come across in the artists is something that they wish that they could go back to. It's very reminiscent for them, but for whatever reason, they've kind of strayed away from it. So I think what I've been able to do is remind people of something that they fell in love with, and thankfully, I've had the mindset to be able to adapt what I do into this current climate. So it's a balance of, like you said, I guess there might be a little bit of cynicism there, but I've always kind of just carried myself with at the very least, just have the work ethic of being ready for situations to open up for you. Not expecting the world, but if the world is available to you, be ready for it. So.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the soul samples. My brain, when people say that, my brain immediately goes to like the 70s, where you're crate digging all these Berry Gordy produced tracks and speeding them up ×2. But then, like, I heard you freak a Music Soul Child beat for like Teach Me. And then I'm like, well, shit. Like, I'm old. That song came out in 2002. So yeah, that is an oldie. That is a classic. Sure, you can extract soul from that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's all within the feeling. I'm 33 years old, so I kind of know the whole...
We're the same age.
Yeah, like the late 80s R&B, because I had an older sister that was always pumping it. The 90s era, and then, I think my personal era being in high school is when Music Soul Child was out, and acts like Tank and Jaheim and all that kind of stuff. So, honestly, I just try and pull the soul out of whatever resonates with me, like when you really try and boil down the definition of what soul music is, I can't put words to that, but I know it when I hear it or when I feel it, or at the very least, I try and make something soulful in my own right.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Like, if you're in New York, it's like, oh, I'm listening to East Coast rap, or if I'm in California, I'm listening to West Coast rap. But if you're listening to R&B, like I grew up in Texas, we're the same age, and we're listening to Case, we're listening to Tank and all that. It's funny how that kind of works.
Baby girl, what times get rough,
I guess aside from that similarity, what was it like growing up, like on the West Coast? Was it a suburb? What was, you said you had a sister who was really into music. Was it like a very musically infused family? What was that like?
Yeah, it actually was. Not that anybody played any instruments, but music has always been a soundtrack to my life. So, like I said, my older sister, she is, I want to say 11 years older than me, 12 years older than me. So, whenever my mom would go to work, especially like on the weekends or something like that, I was sitting there watching Yo MTV Raps and Video Soul all day long with her. And the good thing about having I have two sisters, but with my older sister, we listened to EPMD, we listened to, I want to say, NWA, we listened to P-Rock and CL Smooth. It was a mixture of everything. Janet Jackson, she was a huge Janet Jackson fan. But it was never like, this is the type of rap that you're supposed to listen to. You're only supposed to listen to Big Daddy Kane and like stuff that sounds like this. It was a wide range of everything. And that kind of really filtered into my own music taste. And then as far as just growing up out here on the West Coast, I'm from Covina, which is right next door to West Covina. So I want to say that's about 30, 40 minutes outside of LA. So it's not too far, but if you're in LA, it feels like a whole other world. We've always kind of had the mentality of LA is there. We'll go into LA, we'll run around, and we come back out here to, I guess it's referred to as the suburbs. But we just have more of a melting pot out here, I guess. I grew up with Hispanic kids, Filipinos, white kids, black kids, a little mix of everything. So you got everybody's culture mixed in. And I think that really got infused into my personality and the music that I would go on to create.
We're talking a lot about family. Are you big into like genealogy, like where your ancestors were from, or have you ever like dove into your family history and found out something interesting?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Within the past couple of years, I've been a lot more interested in it just because I had a very weird encounter with a man an older Nigerian man who asked me where I was from, and I told him Covina, and he asked again where I was from, and what he was trying to get towards is like where in Africa I was from, because according to him, I looked like I was from Nigeria, specifically his tribe, the Igbo tribe, and that kind of set like the whole desire to kind of tap into stuff like that. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. But within that, there's a famous painting called Portrait of a Moor. So if you know what I look like, you can Google Portrait of a Moor. It's from, I want to say, the 1500s, and it looks exactly like me. It's kind of eerie the way it looks like me. So
what's the distinguishing feature? Like, if he can look at you and tell
his facial features, and he has a beard. And when I first saw it, honestly, it was on my IG Explore page, so I thought somebody did some weird fan art of me. I looked it up, but it's an actual picture. And like I said, this was in the midst of me trying to research my roots. So when I came across that, I kind of left it at that. I felt like that was kind of like a spiritual sign to kind of let me know what my roots were. And then I just recently went to Spain, which, if you know any of that history, that's where the Moors, kind of took over and ran that land. So there's a lot of little things that have kind of happened that have gotten me in touch with, I feel like, my roots of genealogy are. Because at this point, I mean, you can look into it, but you'll never really know. They're all going to tell you you're from Western Africa, because that's just, basically we just have to chalk it up to that with the slave trade and all that. So.
Man, it's crazy you just mentioned that, because I was watching this clip with Questlove, and he was taking it to Ancestry.com kit and discovering that he is a descendant from the last known group of enslaved people who came to the United States from, you guessed it, West Africa, and the slave ship. But he was blown away. Like, he was speechless. Like, he didn't know that piece of information was going to be bestowed upon him.
Right.
And it seems like that's kind of like the go-to. And if that can elicit such a visceral response from him, I always wonder why more people don't learn about their past. And it's funny that you tapped into it from a spiritual side, but the 2020 census, the U.S. Census Bureau, is now officially changing how it's going to ask Black people to designate their race. So under the checkbox for Black or African American, the Bureau is adding a new space for the questionnaire, so you can actually write in Jamaican or Nigerian. So I think a lot of people are going to be forced now to know where you're from, like where you're from. So that's good.
Right, yeah, but I don't know how much you can force that, because honestly, it comes from a space of desire. Because like I said, like there's only so much information available to us. And just another random fact: my family from my mom's side, they're all from Salisbury, North Carolina, and I want to say my grandmother, somebody sent me a picture of the African American Museum in D.C. And just through that picture, I learned that Salisbury was like a major, slave hub as far as like when they came over on the boat. So that led me asking questions that nobody else really knew to answer or even tell us at any point in my life. Have we always been in Salisbury? How long have we been there? We were in a city before called Morris, but did we go from Salisbury to Morris and back to Salisbury? And honestly, like as you asked, these are all things that I kind of talk to my family members about in bits and pieces and try and put little things together.
Well, I think this whole movement was brought upon a large group of people who were descendants of something called chattel slavery. And I guess there's so many people that are a part of that they signed petitions. Because a lot of people, if you ask a Black person where they're from, they're going to be like, oh, well, I'm from Philly, I'm from Baltimore. But it's like, no, where are you from? Where are you from? Like, this is a category that's going to give clarity to a lot of, like, millions of people. But I think you're right. It's like, you can't force people to know about this. They're going to have to take it upon themselves.
Yeah, it's for the people that want to find it, that want to seek it out. And hopefully more people do. Like I said, I go back and forth as far as, like, finding the actual, whether it's doing a test or like going that route, or just kind of being at peace with what I feel like the universe has showed me at different moments. So
I guess now I have a clearer picture of who you are and where you're from. I guess the last piece of the puzzle would be like, what was that aha moment where you knew you wanted to do music? Was it like a winding road to find it, or you kind of always knew? Or maybe your sister kind of steered you in the right direction?
When I look back, it was always there were always smaller moments that kind of highlighted where I was going. I remember just as a kid when I had the CNC, I would always try and scratch on it. I wanted to be a DJ. So,
Right.
but not realizing what I wanted to do as a kid, that's just what I was gravitating towards. And then my mom, she knew I liked to listen to the radio all the time, so she started buying me blank cassettes. So I would take these blank cassettes, once again, not realizing what I was doing, but I would just sit by the radio and record the songs that I wanted. Anytime I heard the song that I wanted, I would press record, and I'd stop it right afterwards, and then I might try and fill in my own little talk breaks and stuff like that. But I think that was all that creative energy at a very young age, trying to figure out what it was going to manifest into. And I'd say that aha moment was actually when I was 11 years old. My sister, she was going out one night with her best friend. I want to say Missy's I Can't Stand the Rain came on just on MTV Jams or something like that. And it was the weirdest beat I'd ever heard at that point. And I overheard my sister's friend asking who it was, and she explained it was Missy. She was working with this new this new producer named Timbaland. So that was kind of like the first time I heard those type of terms where it was like, okay, producer, Timbaland, he made the beat. However he did that, that's what I want to do when I grow up. So that was really my aha moment that I can remember to this day, as far as hearing that one particular song and just knowing I wanted to do what Timbaland did.
So that was a spark. Were you ever captivated by his remix game? Because if we're talking 1996, 97, then I'm thinking Usher, You Make Me Wanna. There was a Timbaland remix of that from around the time that he was getting popular with the Missy and Aaliyah songs. And as far as I know, it's the only time they worked together. But then he did like Destiny's Child, Say My Name,
Right.
which is, I think it eclipses the original. But have you done official remixes for people? Is that even worth doing in this day and age?
This is something I actually want to bring back. It's fun for me creatively to remix records, and that's something that we're actually starting to do. Actually, my very first placement that I ever got, it was an official remix that had Kool G Rap on it, but this was MySpace era. So I've done that. I've worked with Ozzy Sierra from Oza Motley on a remix for a side project that he had. So I've done a couple here and there, but it's definitely a lane that I want to open back up because, like I said, being from the era that we're from, I remember hearing the Bad Boy remixes, the Easy Mo B remix, the Timbaland remix, stuff like that. It gave a fresh perspective to a song.
Yeah, I mean, many people don't realize that those remixes actually led to like the studio magic. Like there was this Nelly Furtado "Turn Off the Light" remix that Timbaland did, which predated Loose by a few years, but it shows how these two would have been a natural fit. And then they created Promiscuous Girl and.
I can't see you. It's kind of dark in here. I can't see you. It's kind of dark in here. I can't see you. So I really, really want you to see me. So baby, don't turn off the lights, girl. I really, really want you to see me. So baby, don't turn off the lights, girl. I really, really want you to see me. So baby, don't turn off the lights, girl.
All that, and then I think Floetry did "Say Yes," which was a Timbaland remix, and it sounds a lot. If you go back and listen to it, it sounds a lot closer to Crimea River. And then if you listen to Crimea River, Marsha Ambrosius did the backing vocals on it. So they're excellent songs, and people sleep on those remixes. But it was like, I think it gave the producers a taste of what they could do in the studio on a bigger scale. So
right, and it opens up opportunities because even just recently, we haven't done any work, but I was just randomly flipping a Teedra Moses record, and she caught wind of it, and Anthony Hamilton did as well. And they reached out and followed me on social media. Me and Teedra have talked about working on music, but just stuff like that, like you never know whose ear you're going to catch by reimagining the record. So,
and what about your eye? Like if you were seeing Missy's "Can't Stand the Rain," that's back then when people poured creativity into music videos. Like, shout out to the old Busta Rhymes videos where he's running away from elephants with tusks in his hands, like that was a great era for hip hop videos like that. I'm sure that like added to you being captivated too, like seeing those visuals with that new sound.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it made hip hop seem so big. It put everything on steroids that I wanted to do. I fell in love with the music, but when you see Missy standing there in the Hype Williams video with, the huge, the trash bag, just everything blown up. It was a crazy, it magnified what I was feeling, and it made it feel like some superstar shit that you could end up doing. Even you could say some of the mid-tier acts at that time. I remember watching the Mike Geronimo video and just thinking that it looked crazy. And Lords of the Underground, just different groups. I can remember a lot of groups and songs based off of videos. And that's another important aspect to kind of bring into what we do today. A lot of what I try to do, I don't want to recreate the 90s at all, but I want to study the elements of what they were doing and infuse it into what we're doing now.
Yeah, like if I'm asking, like, why did Michael Jackson get the guy who directed American Werewolf in London to do a Thriller video? So now you have these music videos on these grand production scales.
Right.
And then why did that phase out when MTV and BET went away, when you can still get, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 million views on YouTube? You can monetize YouTube and still make money. But it's like, vinyl records are still here, even though people are putting their music on Spotify. So it's not like copying a 90s model, but I like that you're trying to figure out, well, what works, what doesn't work, why did people stop doing what they were doing, and then kind of going from there. I think bringing back the remix, I think that you're dropping vinyl. I think, when you drop music, you're not necessarily reaching out to 100 blogs anymore. I get that, yeah. But there's still a lot of stuff that worked back then that still applies today. So I think you're very smart in that regards.
The internet is a gift and a curse, man. It's a tool. So it's awesome to get on there and to tweet your project out and to Facebook it and all that kind of stuff and to look at your Spotify numbers. But I believe there are still analog, real world things that you have to do. You still have to put your foot on the pavement. You still have to go out and network. You still have to go to the physical studio where opportunities happen because you're in the room. And so we kind of take that approach with everything. It's like, okay, we can record a song and upload it, but do we want to do a visual with it? How do we want to push it? Like, how do we make this a real world thing? So that's kind of how we operate within our whole just our strategy with putting out stuff.
Well, the last thing I'm going to reference the past is you proved your salt at this point, and then enter Mike Ross, who put out Pharcyde and Dilla. So now you can share the same sentence as JD when people talk about him in the same breath. What was that like for you?
It was an accomplishment. I'm always weird about the Dilla connection and the Dilla comparisons because that just always feels like holy ground to me. I've always felt like the biggest tribute I could pay to J Dilla is to be myself and not to try and copy what he did, which is, I hear some of that going on and it's like, you know what, like he wouldn't rock with that. I would want to show one of my teachers that I've learned from them by kind of studying what they did and why they did it and infusing it into what I do. So with me taking that approach over the years and people still feeling some kind of kinship or connection, it's, people that really worked with him from House Shoes to his brother Illa J to Mike Ross to these people kind of seeing that there's some kind of connection that it's almost like from the family tree. You're obviously a descendant of Dilla. Like it means a lot. It's an honor that I don't take lightly, but at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, like, it's a beautiful thing, but I got to keep working. I got to keep defining who Jansport J is. And at the end of the day, I will always tell people I'm a student of Dilla, Ninth Wonder, DJ Premier, Pete Rock, and Madlib. There's more, but those are my teachers. So anytime somebody associates me with one of my teachers, whether it be fans or people that actually work with them, it means the world to me.
I mean, if your head was chiseled into that Mount Rushmore next to Madlib, I don't think people would say you're out of place.
Well, I got some more work to do, but that would be beautiful.
And shout out to House Shoes. He wanted to come on my show, but he didn't have a mic. Shout out to him.
I just chopped it up with him before we hopped on here.
He's going through cigarette withdrawal, so maybe it wasn't the best time. But I know people gravitate towards Dilla post death, and they're quick to jump on the bandwagon of his greatness. But what I remember most, it wasn't even music related. There was, and you can equate this to Nipsey Hussle as well. But there was a period after Dilla died that I remember everyone that was a part of that neo soul movement, like Common, Questlove, where they felt like maybe their whole entire movement lost gas and lost its inspiration. Like D'Angelo didn't want to do much anymore. It was hard getting Erykah Badu to do anything. It's all the left of center people were just falling by the wayside. And that whole movement, which was once thriving and moving forward, it suddenly lost its wings and they all fell into that funk. So when one man's work can hinder on so many different relationships and like affect a musical movement, I think that's what's powerful. Like if we lost Pete Rock, if we lost Madlib, I think there would be a domino effect that would ripple through, like Ninth Wonder too. So maybe that's the connection.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'd even say personally, like my connection with Dilla, it's not what people would expect it to be. I was always somewhat familiar. I don't think I tied JD and J Dilla together until like his last year living. I remember I found out who J Dilla was. I want to say I was on MySpace and Stone Throw was putting out like the Chrome Children album or something like that. So I saw Madlib was on it and J Dilla, and I was like, oh, J Dilla's JD. But I had just always been a fan of the records, but at that point, I was still Timbaland, Pharrell centric. You know, I wasn't a super Dilla fan. I just knew, ironically, some of my favorite records of all time, you know, Find a Way is like my favorite song ever by Tribe. You know, he had his hands on it. So when he passed, the day that he passed, I was familiar with him and his name, and I went to Tower Records in West Covina, and I bought donuts. And that day, I know people always say J Dilla changed my life, but that day my life was literally changed because I had never heard an instrumental album in my life. I didn't know you could do that. And me being a producer, I've always had more ambitious ideas that I wanted to do beyond just making beats for rappers and for singers. I've always kind of wanted to create albums, but I felt like I had to do that through a rapper or a singer. So when I heard this album, Donuts, and that it captured my attention all the way through, at that moment I said, wow, I can do this too. You know, and that's when I started to hear more, and that set me on the path that I'm on now. So, you know, for some people that caught on a little bit late, you know, I could relate to just that heaviness and that instant connection that he had with people, because that's what it was for me. I remember some of the JD work. I was familiar with the Far Side work, but to be honest, he wasn't my guy in the same way that Timbaland was until Donuts. And some people will even say, you know, Donuts is cool, but it's not Welcome to Detroit. It's not Fantastic Volume 2 and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But for me, Donuts is the Bible. Like, that's how I see it. So.
And I think, you know, that's the difference between me and you, and why you're you and I'm me. I listened to that and I figured it was an instrumental album because I was like, how can you rap over Lightworks?
Sparkle and gleam, light up the skies. The name of the game is Lightworks.
How can you rap over Two Can Win? Your perspective is probably way more accurate than mine. I just figured it worked better sonically than if a rapper came on there. The beats are just, they're hard to ride. You know what I mean? Even when I listen to Low, it's a concept album, and I get that. So, you know, if you put a rapper on there, well, then maybe it's not serene. Maybe it's not hypnotic anymore. Maybe it gets in the way of the story you're trying to tell, especially because if I'm paying attention to the tracks, they're in short bursts. It's fairly short in length, and I'm sure that was intentional.
That's like I said, that's the Donuts Bible to me. That's, you know, there's certain things I like to experiment, try new things, but there are certain just formats that I follow with an instrumental album. I want to keep a track under 2 minutes if I can, because that's how Donuts hit. It's very just, you know, hitting you with sounds repeatedly. And I want to say Black, White, Goldville, it might have had longer tracks. It was more of a journey. But like I said, that just kind of goes back to what Donuts meant to me and what I took away from it. Like, this is the format for instrumental music that I follow. It's damn near, you know, it's the same as film. Like, you have to do an 8-bar hook and a 16-bar verse. You know, like, I just felt like that's what he established with it, and I try and kind of follow with that.
And also, it's like if I want to hear the song again, I'll just rewind it back. So I can take instead of the song being 5 minutes, it could be 2 minutes, and if I want to hear it again, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
you listen to Donuts twice in a row, and that's the effect that it had on me. I was like, wow, I want to make something that people want to replay. I don't. You know, I feel like there's so much music that's just being thrown out right now that doesn't have any lasting impact. And I want somebody to play my stuff, you know, back to back for it to like really feel like a body of work.
Yeah, we don't go down the DJ Khaled method. We don't put 15 beats with 6 rappers a piece and put out 8 videos and 9.
Yeah, I don't. You know, and I can't be mad at it, because at the same time I have an appreciation for that, because that's from the I want to say that's the Funk Master Flex, that's the Puff Daddy. Like, that's important as well. Like, it's important to keep that tradition going, but that's not what I do, you know? So I have an appreciation for what Khaled does, and seeing that, and that's not an easy thing to do it correctly. But like my lane is the bodies of work. I have to be inspired, whether it comes across to the listener or not, whether they see that it's a concept album. That's where I leave it up to interpretation. I can't tell people how to interpret my art, but I know as far as me making it, I have to have some kind of concept or just feeling or emotion that I want to evoke in something. When I made Pharaoh, that wasn't even really a concept album. It was looking at a picture of Rakim and being in the blizzard in New York. And I said, I want to make an album that feels like this moment right now.
In the building. Yeah, yo.
This stare that Rakim has, and just this cold New York blizzard that I love. I love this weather. I want to make an album that feels like this. So that's kind of what I draw my inspirations from.
When it's done, how do you know it's done?
That's a great question. It's done when it feels like I've captured a moment in time. What I kind of tell fellow artists that might ask me about it, it's not about, the album can always be better. You'll be working on the album forever if you're trying to, I can tighten this up, I can make this better. But to me, it's how great can I get it to fit within this time capsule? That's kind of telling a story or a narrative of this moment in my career, this moment in my life. And I feel like for the most part, I've been able to do that throughout my career because I can listen to any album in my catalog. I can remember the girl I was dating. I can remember the car I was driving. I can remember the issues I was having because I've kind of stayed within that framework. So for me, I know a project is done when I feel like I'm getting out of that time capsule. It's like, okay, no, this is what it is. Let's polish it up and give it to the people.
And you have the freedom to do that. You don't have like a label that's like, hey, you've been on this kick where you're releasing one album a year. So we expect you like every June, you need to turn something in. And maybe emotionally, you're not there yet. What do you do?
Well, that's where I'm at right now. But the funny thing is, I know I'm not there yet. I know for the next album that I want to do, I need a year or two because I really want to level up and live some life and really incorporate some things that I'm not ready to do yet. I've always took the approach of the first thing that happens is I get the feeling of, okay, I want to work on a new album. It's time to work on a new album. And I know right then I'm going to spend at least 2 or 3 months making trash. But I know I have to go through that process to get to the 1 or 2 gems. That's like the very start of what direction I'm going to go in. So with Pharaoh, like I knew I wanted to work on an album. It had a couple different names. But when I made Okay, I was like, okay, here we go. This is what it's centered around. Everything is centered around this track, this type of feel. So with that, and I always take the approach of I want to make the art first. I want to get it together, mix and master it, take a step back, and then figure out what it is and figure out where to take it if we're taking it to a label, if we're self-releasing it, if it's going to be a free download, whatever it is. I try as much as I can to never mix the business within my art. And to some people, that's a foolish thing, and I can understand it. But I like, in a sense, doing like method acting when I'm producing. I want to be all the way in that world. I don't want anybody telling me what kind of record I need. I have to be all the way raw with the music I'm making so it can be as pure as it is. And so it can capture that time period. And then I'll take a step back and be honest and we'll say, okay, well, this is this type of record. It should probably go over here. We can actually press up vinyl because I feel like people will be emotionally attached to this one. And that's how we're moving with this one. But I always do the art first and then take off that hat and sit with the team and figure out, okay, now what is this and how do we sell it?
And I want to add psychologically to that too. A person who has taken personal responsibility recognizes an all-important truth about happiness. Your happiness depends on much more than your attitude than it does on objective external circumstances. So if you ain't happy with the music, don't turn it in. I feel like what you just said, a lot of people need to hear that. Not just music producers, just a lot of people need to hear that.
Let me just butt in for a second. With Low, I finished the whole version of that album that was done, I want to say November 2017. And riding around listening to it with my sister, it just didn't feel right. It was one of those situations, like I said, I'll make the album and I'll take a step back and listen to it and figure out what it is. And when I took that step back, we had already engaged with Fat Beats, getting ready to start pressing things. And I had to tell them, I said, this is not it. I need 3 or 4 more months. I know where I'm going, but this is not it. And that 3 or 4 months, I did, I want to say, 16 new joints of the 21 that are on there. And then it felt right. So, just going off of what you're saying, you have to be able to sit with it, and it has to feel good. You can't just put it out because it's done. My mom taught me at a very early age. She used to make me rewrite my homework, and I would get mad. And she said, you have to rewrite it because your name is on it. So that kind of always gave me the mindset of whatever I put out, my name is on that. So it has to be representative of who I am.
Oh, let's talk about that, because most of the time you're not making a beat for anyone specifically. Maybe you're just making beats and someone will hit you up for production. That process just seems like not ideal. Like if you're passionate about making beats, right? Like what if a rapper takes the beat? Let's just say he buys it, fully paid. It's his, transaction complete, but the song's whack and your name is attached to the song. It's enough for you to be like, I can't take too much of this. I took care of this 68 Cutlass. I restored it. The interior's on point. The engine growls. The wheels are shiny. And then some dude buys it from me and wrecks it the next day and throws his McDonald's trash in the back seat. Like I would imagine that you can't take too much of that.
That's the interesting part. As your profile starts to raise, you have to manage that, and you have to be mindful of that. You can't sell a beat to everybody. First of all, you need to hear their music to know where they're going. And even though you might be able to use that money that your rate is, it's like at the end of the day, is that worth my name being on something that's not going to be up to the level of what I need it to be? There are opportunities that you have to turn down because it's like, you know what, like we're here now, we're at this level. We can't, 2 or 3 years ago, I could sell you this beat. Not too many people knew my name. It's whatever, we can make this happen. But now we have to level up. And within that, like I know even as I ascend, there's going to be a lot of old records that come out, and you have to chalk that up to the game. Like that, it is what it is. But what it's really about is just being consistent and trying to be consistent with excellence. So when the random person does hit me up, like you were saying, most of the beats I make, I don't make with somebody in mind. I'm just making a beat, and if somebody hits me up, I can find a couple joints that'll fit them. And then we work it out that way. But my joy, even above doing instrumental albums, is producing a whole project for a singer or a rapper. That really, it gets me to the core of my essence as a producer. As a producer and as a person, I play the background. I'm here to inspire. I'm here to figure out what makes you tick and to create a world for you. And that's what I've tried to do with El Prez, with Milad. Me and Stally are working, so we're just going through that whole process again. It's invigorating, and I can tell the story from working with El Prez. I make soul sample based beats, and he has a very heavy West Coast accent, a very LA accent. So I was just intrigued by hearing what his voice would sound like on my beats, but I didn't know what the sound would be yet.
Yeah, there's this track called I Love to Give You Light. Alchemist gave Snoop Dogg, and you would think like, man, that like you described it, that soul sample, that church sound going with this West Coast slang, you don't know what it's going to sound like.
Say, man, hey, ushers, deacons, lock the door.
Yeah. First of all, giving honor to God and all the ministers on the pulpits, ushers, deacons, and my lovely choir. They sound so beautiful, don't you agree? Sing it, sister.
Also, God purchased a new Escalade.
It goes together a lot better than you think, and it's like one of my favorite Snoop tracks. It's one of my favorite Alchemist tracks. I think that's it.
You just never know. I have 4 records with Snoop. I never in the world, I never thought I would work with Snoop Dogg because I didn't think our styles would mesh. My homegirl works for him, so I sent some records through, and we've been able to work, and here and there, and he's gotten on 4 of my beats through mixtapes, through stuff for other artists, and I always had that pipeline to send him some stuff. So I learned through that process, like never, you might have an idea of what somebody wants, but at the same time, send what is the most true to your sound. And I have Snoop on some soul samples, and it's crazy. I have Snoop on Patrice Rush, and I have Snoop on some the Choice 4, I want to say is the name of the group, just like some super soulful stuff. But what cut through was it was just a dope beat, and it was soulful. Kind of going back to what, when we started, I really believe a lot of these rappers, they hear these soul samples that they haven't heard in a long time, and it does something to them, because A&Rs and these labels for so many years have told them that they couldn't do that, or they shouldn't be on those type of records. They should be on the trap record. They should be on the 74 BPM records. And when they hear it, it's just refreshing, and they want to rap. Like, a lot of these people want to rap is what I'm learning in these studios.
Well, let's talk about that, having an A&R in your ear. I watched that doc of Mics and Men, the new Wu-Tang one, and it seems that there was a great divide on RZA. Like, they love him, but you could visibly see they didn't want to bite the hand that fed them. As anyone who has used RZA's old production as a source of inspiration, I wanted to get your take on that, because if we look at Wu-Tang Forever, classic. But then if you look at Iron Flag, I mean, it's almost like they had a can't lose formula, but his production wasn't hitting. Do you think that was maybe A&Rs were in, like, hey man, you can't have eight black dudes in the studio acting all crazy. Like, you need to conform your sound this way.
I don't know if those are A&Rs as much as it is RZA probably he wanted to do something new and experimental. And sometimes you have to have the frame of mind. I sound crazy for trying to give RZA advice, but let me just say, like, just in my opinion, because RZA is a GOAT, but I think your ideas, you have to filter them through your resources. So this new idea that he might have had for Iron Flag, sonically, where he wanted to take it, wasn't for Raekwon and for You God and for Method Man. It was for some other artists. But because these are the resources that you have, you want to try out your new idea on your go-tos that might have the biggest platform, but it might not connect. So I think, just from the outside looking in, I think that's more the issue. I don't know if any A&R was telling RZA what to do back in, when that album came out. What was that, 2000, 2001? Around?
Was it Interscope?
Yeah, it might have been Interscope. I just know Iron Flag was the album I got in trouble for listening to. At that time, he was at the peak of his powers. So I don't imagine any A&Rs getting in the way, telling him what he could do. I think, honestly, that was RZA just as a producer and an artist, which I can relate to, just wanting to try different sounds and go in different directions. Him trying to do it with the resources that he had. Like, Wu-Tang is right in front of him. Let's do it, with these guys.
Yeah, it's tricky, man, because the things that you loved Pharrell and Timbaland for like making a beat for Britney Spears and then turn around and doing a beat for Jay-Z and then turn around and doing a beat for the Clips, that's the same thing that gets a lot of people in trouble. Like,
that's what Pharrell and Timbaland had. They had the wherewithal to say, oh, let me give this record to Britney Spears because I want to try this out. Let me give this one to Roscoe P. Coltrane. Let me give this one to Vanessa. They had these various resources. They weren't trying to pinhole all their different sounds that they want to try to the same artist.
That's dope, man. Well, I think that kind of goes full circle. Now I'm just waiting in anticipation for number 10. I think the message that we've drove over and over is the key is being consistent even when you don't want to be. And I think that kind of lends like your greatness, that self-discipline you've developed. So I think a lot of people are going to listen to this. Hopefully they take something away from it. All right, Jansport J, you're a good man. Thank you.